Good afternoon. I stand here as a political director for the New Florida Majority. My name is Senator Dwight Bullard. I'm here to not only welcome the great slew of speakers that we have here, but to kick off what we're calling Emancipation Week here in Florida. And so, just to give you a little background, on May 20th, 1865, enslaved Africans were informed of their freedom by the U.S. government. Of course, this happens much to the chagrin of the folks there, a month after the Civil War had ended, but still at another month before the final group of enslaved Africans would find out. So we took the sort of principal understanding of emancipation and informing people of their freedom and more importantly, fighting and acknowledging that freedom isn't guaranteed and is oftentimes fought for on many different fronts, to recognize the need for emancipation on multiple topics and subjects here in the state of Florida. Most importantly to us at the New Florida Majority, of course, is the restoration of rights of returning citizens. We understand that embedded, unfortunately, in our state constitution since 1868 is the language that prohibits those who've committed felonies from receiving their basic civil rights. We view, at New Florida Majority, we view civil rights more in line with human rights. And one of those basic human/civil rights is the right to vote, the right to participate in government. We believe and understand that far too often people who are left out of the conversation oftentimes end up being the most victimized and violated by policies that the state passes. And so we acknowledge that the 1.63 million citizens of the state of Florida who do not have the right to vote deserve to have their voices heard, and so this week is for them. That being said, we have a great lineup of speakers who are going to tell you a little bit more about what they're doing, the activities that are taking place, and more importantly, bring understanding as to why this is so important. So I want to bring up none other than the Deputy Director for the ACLU of Florida, Attorney Melba Pearson.
Good afternoon. My name is Melba Pearson. I am the Deputy Director of the ACLU of Florida. I want to welcome everyone to our new office and our space on this very significant day. The ACLU of Florida is proud to be hosting this kickoff of the New Florida Majority's Emancipation Week observations because we recognize the role in history and the role that history plays in shaping the lives of the people of Florida. Addressing racial justice is critical to the mission of the ACLU. Because of the many racial inequities in our criminal justice system, reforming that system is central to the cause of racial justice. That is the major reason why criminal justice reform is one of the key priorities and one of the top priorities here at the ACLU. Now, here's a few facts for you. Florida is truly an extreme outlier when it comes to criminal justice. More children are sent to adult court and prison in Florida than in any other state. Between 2005 and 2015, Florida's incarceration rate grew by 18%, as opposed to the national rate, which is 3%. Florida's sentences, the lengths increased 166% between 1990 and 2009, which is more than any other state in the country. There are roughly 100,000 people in Florida prisons, the third largest state prison population in the United States. And while the sheer numbers of people in Florida's jails and prisons are staggering, the racial disparity is even more so. The incarceration rate is 3.6 times higher for people of color than it is for whites. These numbers didn't happen by accident. They are a result of decades of relentlessly expanding the size of the criminal justice system and needlessly throwing away many lives while wasting trillions of taxpayer dollars. We need reform so that we are not stuck with a criminal justice system that doubles down on policies that are unproductive, wasteful, increase crime, and is dominated by racial disparities. This is why the ACLU has launched a nationwide campaign for smart justice to end the war on drugs, to make sentences fit the crime, incentivize smart practices, and eliminate unnecessary incarceration. Here in Florida, the ACLU has partnered with the Southern Poverty Law Center and joined together to create the Florida Campaign for Criminal Justice Reform. This is a multi-year coalition effort to pass legislation to reduce the overuse of incarceration and address the racial inequities in our criminal justice system. Several of the coalition's slate of priority bills made great strides this legislative session. This reflects the bipartisan recognition among voters and legislators alike of a serious need for criminal justice reform in Florida, and this is a solid foundation for us to build on for the next legislative session. The legislature also allocated $300,000 to study the state's criminal justice system, which is a critical and important first step. We anticipate the research and the data will lead to recommendations for substantive criminal justice reform measures for the 2018 legislative session. The tide is turning on criminal justice reform. We are finally beginning to roll back those decade-long policies that have created vast injustices and destruction in communities of color. As I said before, we recognize the role that history plays in bringing us to where we are today. On this observance of the anniversary of emancipation, we also recognize that Florida voters have a chance to erase one of the stains of an era spent trying to undermine the rights of newly freed African Americans. Florida's lifetime ban on voting by persons with past felonies was conceived of in the years after the emancipation to limit the political power of the state's emancipated black citizens. We are only one of three states with a lifetime voting ban. And since it was put into our state's constitution, the lifetime voting ban has functioned hand in hand with racial inequities in the criminal justice system to serve as the largest voter suppression policy in the nation. The Florida Voting Restoration Amendment would change that by creating an opportunity for redemption for those who have already paid their debt to society. We believe in second chances. This amendment would allow a person, once they have completed all of the terms of their sentence, to earn back their right to vote. This means completing the jail or prison sentence, paying back fines and restitution, any community service, and all other terms of probation or parole. Floridians from all walks of life support people being able to earn back their right to vote because it gives them a stake in the community and it makes it less likely that they will end up back in prison. The people behind this amendment include some of the groups that are standing here today. We are working with men and women who have served their time and have earned their second chance. So as we reflect this week on a century and a half of history, we are also eagerly preparing for Floridians to not only give the people who have served their time in our criminal justice system a second chance, but also to wipe away part of the legacy of the ugly mark on our nation's and on our state's history. Thank you.
Thank you greatly, Ms. Pearson. We, of course, love and appreciate the work that the great folks at the ACLU are doing, not only in the forefront of this push to get rights back, but more importantly on making sure that all the freedoms that we hold so dear and dear to our hearts are protected here in the state of Florida and abroad. We want to bring up next someone to tell us a little bit more about the great work that the FRRC is doing, and a returning citizen himself to tell his story. I want to bring up Mr. Roderick Kemp.
Good afternoon. I'm honored for the privilege to be here. For as long as I can remember, since being old enough to vote, I have been voting all my life. An unusual circumstance happened to me, whereas 30 years ago, I had a felony charge, and not until as recent as 2015 did they decide to take my voting rights away. So in essence, I kind of fell through a loophole, and it was very devastating to me because I felt like my voice had been taken away, especially since I had been involved in the political process over the years. I volunteered for campaigns, I've run campaigns, I ran a political action committee, and like I said before, I voted for as long as I can remember. This goes to show that I kind of fell through a loophole, but at the same time, there is no set standard or criteria with establishing who gets to vote and who doesn't get to vote. And in the state of Florida, where we have close to 1.6 million people, it's gotten to the point now where essentially it affects almost everybody from every walk of life, from every background. All of us here in the state of Florida, by 2 or 3 degrees of separation, probably know somebody that has been affected by the current laws in the state of Florida. I'm involved now with FRRC, which is Florida Rights for Restoration, and it is a grassroots coalition that is working to gather enough petitions so that people who have committed nonviolent felonies can have their rights restored, and it will be on the 2018 ballot. This is very critical and very important and a historical movement in the state of Florida because of the fact that we have one of the highest numbers of people that are disenfranchised. And I'm an example of somebody who has contributed to society, who doesn't fit that so-called mold that people think of when they think of an ex-felon. They think of somebody that doesn't contribute to society, that they're a violent criminal, that they're a thug or a drug dealer, but that's not the case. And in the state of Florida, there are many laws that can cause you to lose your rights. Laws like, do you know that if you release a helium balloon into the atmosphere, which actually happened to somebody a couple of years ago, that due to the Florida Clean Air and Environment Act, that it is considered a felony. And a lot of people don't know that. When you walk by a construction site, if you just so happen to enter that construction site, if they choose to enforce it, entering a construction site is a felony. So these are harmless crimes that people can lose their voting rights for. So again, I thank you for letting me speak today, and I hope that people can understand that this is something that affects all of us, and it's a part of our citizenship to be able to have the right to vote. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rod, and really, I certainly appreciate the pointing out of the humanistic quality of these citizens, and we use the term returning citizens to remind folks that these folks are part of the everyday tapestry of everyday life, not only here in Florida, but around the country. They are contributing to society, they are going to work, they are paying taxes, and they deserve the same rights and privileges as you or I. That being said, I want to bring up the Vice President of Transitions, Mr. David Tucker, to bring a few words on the economic impact of some of the efforts to dehumanize and oftentimes recriminalize these individuals.
Thank you very much, Senator. It's a privilege to be here. Thank you to the ACLU, Florida Majority. I'm Vice President of Transition, Inc. This is an organization that's been located in Overtown for 40 years. For 40 years, people have walked through our door looking for a second chance. The challenges are great. We do training, we do counseling, we do employment placement services, and follow-up. The challenges are great because we get up to 89 men and women walk through our doors every single month. The challenges are great because we live in the state of Florida, because the incarceration rates are so high. Just wanted to add a few other numbers, and I appreciate the numbers that we've already heard. But if you think about it, at least I think about it, it's quite outstanding. The number of people who have been incarcerated in this country. 1 in 104 adults in the United States are behind bars today. 1 in 31 people are in jail in the state of Florida. We are, of course, number 1 in 4 of the world's inmates, in the United States prisons and jails. Counties spend $80 billion annually on jails. And in Florida, we spend 10% of our general revenue on corrections. That's $1 out of every single $10. We spend it on jails. I'm also a criminal defense lawyer by trade for over 30 years, so I can't pretend that I don't have experience in seeing what brings somebody to my office, what brings someone to the criminal justice system. My experiences, they're people who have lost a sense of dignity, a sense of purpose. Going to jail, in my experience, and certainly in state jail, can reaffirm that. The great thing about these organizations and organizations like Transition is we not only have an opportunity to train somebody, to give someone a new skill set so that they have options, that they have different thoughts, can create a different conditioning, so they have a different decision-making program. And it's not just learning how to dress, it's not just learning how to do a resume, it's not just learning how to show up on time. Those actions create a feeling, an experience of something that many of these people have never experienced before, which is dignity, which is self-love. You know, I like to tell the story whenever I get to have these chats of we had a small fundraiser. And we raised a little money, and our client got to talk about his experience. And as simple a thing as getting a driver's license. So many people have no idea, no understanding, no concept that in neighborhoods in our county, people do not have driver's licenses. They do not have identification documents. It is something which is not the norm for them, and that is the initial challenge. He talked about how he learned how to dress, how he learned the importance of responsibility. He talked about how he felt when he worked. But the most important thing he talked about, the most significant thing I believe he talked about, was how he felt. And how he learned for the very first time in his life that he had dignity. How he learned that he no longer had to be angry. And you can't put a dollar amount on that. And there is an effect of that on the family and on the friends and on the environment because he gets to give it back and he gets to teach it. And that's what we get to do every single day at Transition. I'm grateful to have the opportunity to work there, to be on the board, to see the work happening. But it's a challenge. It really is. The right to vote, to have a voice in the process. I can't think of anything more important to a sense of identity, to a sense of dignity, than the right to vote. I'm grateful for you all for being here, for doing this work. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Tucker, for again acknowledging that these are people. People who, once they've done their time, served their time, oftentimes need training to get reestablished, reacclimated in society, but more importantly, who are ready, willing, and desirous to want to make sure not to return. So the work that Transitions does is so important, and thank you for doing what you do. And again, I want to emphasize again, the doubling down and recognition of these folks as people, as parts of society, as people walking in our everyday. Everyone makes the assumption of what a returning citizen looks like, or someone who's an ex-felon has to have a particular look, walk, way of being. And the reality is that these are people who are everyday citizens that you see on the roadways, highways, and byways here in the state of Florida. And to, again, reemphasize that point, bring another person who happens to be a returning citizen, but to tell his story, and also offer some comments for our Spanish media and Spanish listeners out there, Mr. Luis Garcia.
Thank you. Good afternoon. It's an honor to be here. My name is Luis Garcia. I was born and raised in this city. My parents are Cuban immigrants. Back in 2007, I got into some trouble and was sentenced to 10 years in prison. And I fell under the minimum mandatory laws, so I have about 17 years probation to do. I have a clemency in right now for my probation, but I haven't heard anything about 6 years, and I don't expect to. I've kind of given up. I have other pressing issues to take care of. I've had to accept the fact that I'll probably never be able to vote again, and, you know, whatever with that. I have friends that are still in prison, and I have friends that got out of prison that are still trying to restore their rights, and they're giving up too. You know, I had certain privileges. I had good supporting family and good contacts here in the city. So when I came home, I had a job, I had a car, and now I'm able to be self-employed. And, you know, I run 2 businesses, but still I find myself, you know, I was just trying to get my captain's license, and it doesn't look like I'll get that. I can push for it, but I'm running into these walls, and it's pretty sad because, you know, I'm active in this community. I do as much volunteer work as I can do, and I'm always upfront about my past because I feel I'm on a mission to turn my failures into strengths, and that's the only way I can do it. You know, I always say that I can't imagine where I'd be had it not been for my family and the privileges that I have out here, but I know exactly where I'd be. I'd be, you know, committing crimes again, you know, doing what I used to do. But so it's like I see it, you know, and I know guys that got out and go right back. And while I was in prison, I see guys get out and come back within the year, you know. And it just seems that the system's, I mean, it's already hard enough, you know, it's already hard enough to, you know, psychologically to spend a lot of time in prison and then to come out and readjust to society. But then to have these other barriers, you know, social barriers and economic barriers and, you know, just trying to get a job, you know, I mean, it makes it almost impossible. You know, like I said, I do pay my taxes, and it's kind of sad, and it upsets me, it angers me because I can't vote for my elected officials, and you know, my tax return was 0 because I have school loans too. You know, it's an honor that they called me for this. I feel, you know, I'm always trying to help the next person because it's the only way I can help myself. And it's just it's been really difficult, but I think that, you know, things have to change. I mean, this state's always in the back, you know, with stuff, but we'll see. I'm not sure what you want me to say in Spanish, but that in Spanish? Okay. Mi nombre es Luis García. Yo nací en este país, en Miami, y mis parientes son de Cuba. Yo fui a la prisión en 2007 caí en la prisión por 10 años y tengo 15 o 17 años de probatoria porque me caí debajo de los minimum mandatories por la ofensa de drogas que yo tuve. Yo tuve muchas privilegios aquí con mi familia y mis amigos y pude trabajar por mi familia y por mi propia voluntad. Y por eso es que estoy aquí hoy. Yo veo que yo siempre digo que yo no puedo ver como yo sin la familia y mis amigos y lo que yo tengo aquí, cómo yo voy a estar, cómo llegué aquí en este momento. Pero sí, si no por mi familia y por las cosas que yo tengo, yo estuviera en la prisión otra vez. Y tú sabes, yo pago taxes y los impuestos, y yo hago mucho en la comunidad, pero todavía no puedo votar por mis oficiales de este país o de mi ciudad. Pero por ustedes que no saben lo que hacer si cuando sales de la prisión, hay muchos, how do you say that in Spanish? I forget words sometimes. Hay lugares que puedes ir para ayudarte. El hombre que habló hace un poco con Transitions, hay lugares que te pueden ayudar así. Pero thank you very much.
So in closing, as you've witnessed, as you've seen, why we so deeply believe in this concept of returning citizens is just that. Each of us here in the state of Florida has a responsibility for one another. And when individuals who've done their time in the criminal justice system are transitioning out, the same way that they are now paying the restitutions and reparations, if you will, for the crimes they've committed, we have a responsibility as a citizenry to accept them back willingly and desirous to see them change. And so we're pushing, we're fighting along with the ACLU, along with Transitions, along with FRRC, and so many other allies to make sure that this 2018 ballot initiative gets legs, runs, and ultimately passes. But we need your help. You have an opportunity now, having heard from all these great people, to get involved in the process. And so for those listening, you might have a willingness to go onto the FRRC website, and I believe it is frrc.org. You can download the petitions there. You'll see folks at events throughout the summer, into the fall, going into the new year, actually, trying to get those signatures. We need 700,000 unique signatures on petitions to make sure that this thing gets on the ballot. There's also another means to do it as well. And for those out there who have not yet gotten a chance to get to the Constitutional Revision Commission, happens every 20 years, and we're hopeful that if the petition drive is effective, but more importantly, that those folks on that commission, those 37 members, see fit to add some language onto the ballot as well, or endorse the language that has cleared the Supreme Court, because we find this so critically important for us to be a part of. All right, so again, that website is FloridaRRC.com. Florida RRC, Florida Rights Restoration Coalition, FloridaRRC.com. And I look forward to hitting that benchmark of 700,000 signatures and petitions. With that being said, I want to close out the press conference. If there are any questions for any of our speakers, feel free to ask.
Can I just ask one question? There's been a lot of, in recent news, you've had the Attorney General, Jeff Sessions, talk about going back to an older form of sentencing and criminal justice sentencing. Do any of the people on the panel have a thought about that, and just in general, what how that might affect not just the black community, but in general, kind of the criminal justice?
Well, I'll definitely turn that over. We have two great attorneys in the building, and I'll turn that over to Ms. Pearson and Mr. Tucker to really talk about that, and if any other things you see coming down the pipeline from this current federal administration that seem troubling and really put at risk the rights and privileges that we hold so near and dear. So I'll turn it over to Ms. Pearson and Mr. Tucker.
Thank you, Senator, and thank you for that question. It is very troubling when you look at how this Attorney General is approaching civil rights, how there's discussion about the consent decrees and not policing the police. So we're very concerned about that. But also looking overall, these policies failed. Millions of people ended up in prison behind these minimum mandatories and these policies, and it did not keep our country safer. We were moving in the right direction, starting with the Holder memos, which was under Attorney General Eric Holder, and continued by Loretta Lynch, where we were releasing people from prison who were nonviolent. We were actually closing prisons because folks were being able to go back out into the community and resume their lives and go on the right track. Now, we're falling victim to this false rhetoric and this discussion that the only way to curb crime is to incarcerate masses of people. And even though it's failed, we seem to be going back in the wrong direction. But what we can do on a local level is to make sure we sign the petition and get the rights restored for the 1.4 to 1.6 million people in Florida who can't vote. And to keep pressure on our local officials to do the right thing, because that is where our power lies, in the power of voting and in our unity as a community.
Sometimes I don't know what is going to happen when a new administration with new policies takes over. I don't know the real effect of it. How is it going to affect my life? I'm not certain of that one. But I do know the effect it's going to have on tens of thousands of people who may now be prosecuted in a federal system and charged with crimes, as was earlier said. The new Attorney General is going back to policies that have been proven and shown did not work. But here is the reality that those policies created the largest prison population and per capita prison population that we have. Primarily, those which were most affected were young black men in drug cases. So over the last few years, I've been grateful that there has been a significant change in policies. The Clemency Project, and as well as what's called prosecution memos, or how to go about prosecuting a particular case. And the policies that the new Attorney General wants to return to are those policies that state, take the most serious statute, the most serious crime, and charge it no matter what. And that is what's going to return us to a burgeoning and overwhelming prison population. Because people are going to be charged who before should not have been charged in federal court with the crime. They are no longer going to take into consideration and cannot take into consideration someone's individual circumstance, whether they're a drug addict, whether they were such a low-level player. So the policies go much further than just minimum mandatories. It's related to what's called sentencing guidelines, the amount of time you're going to do in prison. And most importantly, the person or persons who are going to be prosecuted and what you are going to be prosecuted for, because Attorney General Sessions now wants the lengthiest prison sentences possible, no matter who the person is. So there is a real effect here of a vote. Thank you.
Just one last question. Just a lot of talk has been spoken about voting rights. This isn't though a partisan issue, right? So could you guys kind of at least talk about at least the importance of this as it comes to not as a nonpartisan issue, as a way of also not just we live in is there a nonpartisan aspect to this?
Yeah. So I'll touch on that. The reality is that let's be frank. In 1868, when the Constitution was revised to reflect these challenges, it was under the governance of Democrats, right? One of the governors that's relaxed the policies the most was a Republican. So this is a nonpartisan issue. It's a right versus wrong issue. The reality is that we stand here in 2017 in a state that is only one of three that still has these arcane and draconian policies still embedded in its constitution. We're outliers as the state of Florida. We're low-level outliers and looking at other folks progressing further ahead. You look at states where you actually have incarcerated individuals who are allowed to vote in elections. You have other situations where individuals are now being able to be counted as a part of the census in the communities that they come from, as opposed to be lumped into the citizenry that is incarcerated where they are in whatever neck of the woods or that they live in. So we understand the bipartisan nature of this. It's going to be a bipartisan fix. The reality is that 700,000 signatures don't just come from collecting Democratic signatures. You have to make sure that there are Republicans, that independents, non-party affiliates, folks who, oddly enough, have not yet registered to vote but should have to be part of that, the signatories on this. And so it's important for us to really understand that it has nothing to do with party affiliation or who you voted for in 08 or 04 or 2000. The reality is that it's right to make sure that folks who have served their time get their opportunities and their rights back. And so I would encourage everyone, as you saw the myriad of different faces that have come before you today, black, white, Latino, female, male, regardless of your orientation, regardless of your religious background, the community that you live in, 10% of Floridians right now, let me say that again, 1 out of every 10 Floridians is impacted by this in a real way. That means that in your families, somewhere down the line is someone who does not have their rights to vote, who's been living in the shadows, and unbeknownst to you, is being impacted by this inability to vote. And so I encourage you to make sure you sign a petition for them, or more importantly for yourself, because as is pointed out already, just the ridiculous nature of felonies that we have in this state could put anyone in harm's way to have their rights taken away. And so it's important for each and every one of us to step forward in making this reality. So with that being said, I encourage you again, Florida, rrc.com, to download those petitions. Make as many copies as you need to. Influence your circles. You know, they used to have an old organization called Arrive with 5. So we want you to arrive with at least 5 petitions to account for those in your house, your neighbors, your friends, your classmates. All can be signing off on this thing. And I know for those, just the confusion that's out there, for those of you who've already signed petitions in the past 2 years, sign again. This is a new set of petitions in order to get this thing on the ballot for 2018. So if you've already signed a petition in the past and you said, I've already done my due diligence, sign it again. It's better to be safe than sorry. With that being said, we're going to go ahead and close out and thank everyone for participating. Thank you.